Good morning, everybody. I think we're ready to get started. Welcome to I think our fourth annual Capital Strategies Conference. My name is Thomas Reed. I'm the director of the Office of Communications Business Opportunities here at the FCC. Let me tell you just very briefly before I introduce our panelists and Commissioner Pai, who's been very gracious enough to join us and give remarks, a little bit about my office. Our office is the lead policy advisor to the commissioners and the chairwoman on the impact of FCC regulations on small businesses and diverse businesses. That's one aspect of what we do. What we're doing here is one of the other, and I believe one of the really rewarding aspects of what we do, and that is outreach to members of the community, the business community, and partnership with members of the business community in figuring out ways to address some of the thornier challenges that face small businesses and women and minority-owned businesses, and actually all businesses. It's an issue that's easy to encapsulate, but very difficult to address. And for those of you who are entrepreneurs who are here, understand that we're talking about seed capital. How do you get started? How do you attract money? And how do you keep it to fund your ventures? So that's what we're here to do. That's what OCBO focuses on. I'd like to welcome our panelists who've been very gracious to lend us their time and their expertise. J.S. Gamble from Blue Venture Investors, Elizabeth Hess from TRX Systems, Terry Hicks from Ben Franklin Investors and Minority Angel Investors Network, Erwin Krasnow from Garvey, Schubert and Baker, Elizabeth Hess, I said that already, and I think, did I leave anybody out? Frank Montero, Amy Millman from Springboard Enterprises. I'm reading the name cards and my list here, so I've gone off. And again, Frank Montero, who's a former and great director of OCBO, who is here who's here in Fairfax, or actually in Roslyn at Fletcher Health. So I welcome them and thank them for their time, and look forward to hearing their comments. They're going to introduce themselves and their companies in a moment. Before I get well into this, I'd like to take a moment to introduce Commissioner Ajit Pai, who is a longtime alum of the FCC and has come back to join us and done a fantastic job as one of our newest commissioners. So we'd like to welcome him. He'd like to share his experiences, his remarks with you this morning. Thank you, Commissioner Pai. Please.
Well, thanks, Tom. I don't want to take up too much time, but I did want to take a few minutes to say a few things. First of all, thank you for inviting me, and thanks more generally for what you and the office do. I think it's an essential component of the FCC's mission to do events like this to help people on the outside understand that the FCC is not just people like me who push paper and write statements. It's people who are interacting with entrepreneurs and investors and what I like to think of as the real world, the private sector, helping dynamism happen. And that leads to the second thing I just wanted to say is that access to capital has been something that's on my mind. I'm sure it's been on the minds of my colleagues over the last several months and years. It is a feature of this field in particular that entrepreneurship can really have a significant impact on the industry writ large, and of course ultimately for consumers. One of the things I love about this industry is that disruptive innovations can often spring from just a single idea that is germinated in the mind of a single person. And so those ideas, which are so critical, need obviously capital in order to find their expression in the real world. And so that's why I think that this event in particular is so helpful in that endeavor. One of my favorite writers is George Bernard Shaw, and one of my favorite lines of his is that, in heaven, angel is no one in particular. Well, that's certainly not the case here in the real world. I mean, angel investors are very particular people with well-defined views of what constitutes a good idea worth funding and what their investment strategies are going to be. And similarly, entrepreneurs have to think very carefully as well about what their strategies for growing the business are going to be. And I hope that this event augurs a more fruitful matching of ideas with capital, because honestly, that is the future of this industry. Nothing against incumbent companies, they provide great services every day, but it's entrepreneurs who are really making a mark now and I think well into the future. So with that, I don't want to take up any more time, but I do want to say that I wholeheartedly endorse the mission of today's event. I hope it's productive, and if we in the commissioner's offices can be of assistance in helping propel that conversation, do let us know. This is what we're here for, and it's a privilege to serve in this capacity for that reason. So thank you very much, Tom.
Thank you, Commissioner. Appreciate it. I was going to say after Commissioner Pai's remarks that at any point when the chairwoman arrived, we were going to stop whatever we were doing to hear, and she has been gracious enough to join us this morning. Madam Chairwoman, welcome, and thank you for lending us your time and your remarks.
Thank you so much, Tom. I was monitoring things, so when I heard Ajit's name, I said, I have to follow great people, so. Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining our conference today. It gives me great pleasure to welcome you to the FCC, for we recognize the critical role you play when it comes to the economic and social successes of our communities. And while we're coming through sort of a rough patch, I believe, I hope you remain as eager as I am about the goals and objectives that we will address today. We don't host many gatherings like this one, but I want you to know that we realize that you are all on the front lines of innovation and are working on or following areas of technology that are finding their ways into our homes, pockets, and yes, pocketbooks. Last year, I visited Silicon Valley for the first time. And while I was only there 2.5 days, the things that I saw and the people with whom I spoke and the ideas that I just glimpsed for a few moments were jaw-dropping. I realized that the digital textbooks that we were kind of dreaming about just a few weeks, it seems, ago, are being adopted at a faster pace than any of us anticipated. That social networking is more about than about just pictures and making dinner plans, and that the young people in this country, very incredibly intelligent and innovative young people, are generating ideas that none of us could have dreamed of just a decade ago. But of course, there's concern among all of this hope, and fresh thinking and smart strategy in which you are generating could possibly move the needle in the right direction to the benefit of us all. Mass media is at an interesting crossroads. Minority and female ownership in broadcasting, cable, and other telecommunications media is declining rapidly. In fact, as of 2011, there were a mere 12 full-power television stations owned by African Americans in this nation. Just 1 year later, only 5 such stations remain. Minority and female media ownership have been increasingly marginalized over the past decade during a time of increased media consolidation, and those are the voices that we need the most right now. A multitude of viewpoints and perspectives are now more than ever essential to a successful national debate regarding the many challenges of this time. To add to the national conversation, some have mentioned a 3-pronged approach to boost media diversity: cautiously reviewing the Commission's media ownership rules, reinstating the minorities tax certificate, and active public engagement. In order to overhaul the Commission's outdated media ownership rules, I believe we need more information. Current information on minority ownership is obsolete, and more alarming data on female ownership levels in this nation is essentially non-existent. While the FCC is updating our ownership rules, more accurate and encompassing studies are needed to get a more precise picture of the current situation. Only then, I believe, will the FCC be effective in updating its media ownership regulations. On the legislative front, Congress should consider reinstating the tax certificate that was repealed in 1995. This ownership mechanism, which allowed an owner of a radio or television station to sell that broadcast property to someone without paying much in terms of capital gains tax, proved most efficient and effective in boosting diverse ownership, and is certainly worth taking another look at given the current economy. And finally, there's public engagement, which is critical to bringing the issue of lack of media ownership diversity and diversity in the technology space to the forefront. The voice of the people is loud, and if used properly, can make a whole lot of difference. So it's important for this discussion to be tailored to those who are here today. So I hope you will benefit from this robust exchange, because I believe that this country thrives and will thrive best when all groups and all persons have an opportunity to appropriately and adequately contribute to its success. So it is in this spirit that I know that together we can reverse these trends in ownership and in participation, and I know that today's exchange will provide great insights, lasting connections, and big ideas for us to follow. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. Before we get started, a few other announcements. I'd like to give a special welcome. We have a contingent of visitors from the Middle East, a group that call themselves the Tech Girls. They're here from North Africa and to join our conference. Thank you very much for coming. Sponsored by the State Department, I believe. So I'd like to welcome them. Also, if you haven't had an opportunity to, as you come in to the far left, there are a number of handouts that are articles and other presentations by some of our panelists. So please do take an opportunity to gather some of those materials. If you don't get a chance to do that, we will have many of them in our OCBO library, so you can check the FCC website and go to our page. And you'll find the OCBO library where a number of these articles that are on capitalization strategies are available. So if you can get an opportunity to pick those up today, but please do. We've got about an hour and a half, and we're going to get into our panel discussion. I have a number of questions to get things started, but I certainly welcome your questions and encourage you to do so. A couple of my staff members, I think there's a good-looking fellow tall walking around. That's Calvin Osborne. He will have index cards. So I encourage you, if you have questions for our panelists, to write them down. I also insist that you give your name and your company, no anonymity here. And please write legibly. I do not see very well, and write large, so that we can proceed with that. A couple other details. We're going to break for lunch early at 11, just to make sure our panelists have an opportunity to eat. We have Capital Caf, which is here on the premises. It's actually, we eat there every day, and we're still alive. So I encourage you to use that because time will be short. And we will have individuals that can escort you to Capital Cafe in the time between our break period. We also have refreshments in the back, and if you have any other questions about other facilities, please do catch a couple of my staff members who will be walking around here. I think that covers most of it. Let's see. Breakout sessions, for those of you that are registered, those begin promptly at 1. We'd ask everybody to sort of meet back here at certainly about 10 minutes to 1. We've got most of our staff are going to be escorting individuals to the breakout sessions. Most of those sessions, thankfully, are right here on this floor. We have several breakout rooms. We'll be able to get you back and forth. If you have more than one appointment with one of our panelists, please do report back here afterwards, or you'll have one of our staff members will be able to escort you back and forth. But it's not the maze that it has been in the past, because we've had breakout sessions throughout the building. So and with security, that's been complicated. But this one will be a little bit easier. But again, report back here at 12:50. If you have not signed up, please do check in with me, and I think Karen Beverly will be here. We will be monitoring the schedule to see if there are any openings and you can provide us your information, and we can probably get you signed in if those openings are available. So with that, I think I've covered everything. I'm sure I will be reminded if I haven't. Surveys. We'll have surveys available for you to fill out to sort of give us our grades on the value of this conference. So we'll make sure that those are available for you. So now I'm gonna jump into our panel discussion. Again, I'd like to welcome and thank our panelists for lending us their time and their expertise. They do this for free. We appreciate it, and we know that they have busy lives. So I am definitely grateful that they've taken this time. So I'm going to start from my far left. I want to give them all a couple minutes. I'm going to start with Frank. He'll give him a couple minutes to talk to you about his firm and what he does and what has brought him to talk about angel investment. Frank?
Thanks, Tom. As Tom mentioned, my name is Frank Montero. I'm the managing partner of a telecommunications media law firm here in Washington called Fletcher, Hield & Hildreth. I also have what I personally consider to be a distinction of having Tom's position as the director of OCBO back during the Clinton administration. And it's a great office. I just as a plug, it's really a unique office in that there aren't many, and I didn't realize this, I don't think at the time, other government agencies that have such an office there. Specifically, I've gone to the FERC, to the Federal Trade Commission. To an office that is specifically designed at a bureau level to help small women and minority-owned businesses is a pretty amazing thing, and it's an enormous asset. You should take advantage of it. I think I'm here, and I think the then chairman of the FCC, Bill Kennard, asked me to run OCBO back in the 90s because I have worked with, in my case, mostly Hispanic-owned businesses all my life. My family is Spanish. I speak fluent Spanish, and my actual name is Francisco. And so I've watched that part of the industry on the more traditional side grow in the 80s and the 90s, but then in the late 90s watched it morph. And a huge part of what we did in OCBO back in those days, it was during the dot-com boom, and it was how are we going to help small women minority businesses get into this new technology space? Because I do think that a lot of attention is paid to old media, old technology, and the fact of the matter is that while those numbers are abysmal, I've got two teenage daughters, and they're not watching a whole lot of broadcast television or listening to a whole lot of radio. They're consuming vast amounts of media. They are eyeballs for an unbelievable barrage of promos, commercials, content, music videos, you name it. They're just not doing it the way I did it. I don't want to be fixing typewriter ribbons in a digital age. I think my focus has been, to stay on top of these the newer technologies, and continuously the problem has always been capital. It sounds like a broken record, but when I was at OCBO, I was here. It is how to find creative new ways to finance the ability of these entrepreneurs to get to the system. A creation of an office like OCBO is huge. There were what were called MSBICs back in the old days, minority small business investment companies, and they became SSBICs, specialized small business investment companies. But now, there is a new array, whether it's crowdfunding, or angel investing, which has obviously been around for a while, but micro lending. There are more assets potentially available. The idea is getting them to the right communities, getting the information out to the right communities, and certainly a discussion like this is, my personal opinion, invaluable for disseminating that kind of information. So with that, I'll stop.
Thank you, Frank. Erwin?
Hi, my name is Erwin Krasnow. I am a co-chair of the Communications, Media, and Information Technology Group, Garvey Schubert Bear, a law firm. And I come at this representing sort of and having experience on both sides of the funding startup capital issues. I helped found and was vice chair of Broadcast Capital Fund, BroadCap, which is a minority investment fund. And in that capacity, we reviewed hundreds of business plans and made what, in our view, were very, very difficult decisions as to what ventures to fund and what ventures to direct. I've also personally had experience of looking for other people's money. I tried to start a tower company a long time ago based entirely on OPM, other people's money. Tried to raise initially $12 million. And it turned out that I didn't have the vision to select the right management group. The two other members of our team, one a finance type and the other a hard-charging CEO, had such different personality styles that they were arguing and warring, and basically we had a difficult time getting our act together. So I learned something about the challenge of raising money, especially when you're looking for other people's money and not putting very much in yourself. And over the years, I've represented lots of women and minorities, first-timers to the business, and had a lot of success when there was this minority tax certificate that Chairwoman Clyburn mentioned. When I was general counsel of the NAB, so I'm proud of this, I filed a petition with the FCC asking the Commission to provide tax certificates to sales of broadcast stations and then came cable systems to minorities. Sadly, there is no minority tax certificate anymore, and we'll perhaps get into that later. And lastly, I just wanted to highlight the handouts that some of the handouts that I left here and that are posted on the FCC's website. And a lot of the topics, you can go to these handouts to get sort of more detailed information. I'll just read the titles. They're all co-chaired with, I co-chaired them with John Brooks, who's head of media lending at Wells Fargo. Wells Fargo doesn't do any more media lending, so he's no longer in that job. One is how to get money from Uncle Sam. Some people think that basically the Small Business Administration gives out money. They don't. They just guarantee loans. 5 tips on raising startup money from family and friends. There's an acronym FFF, Family, Friends, and Fools, so you have to watch out for that. The other is attracting OPM, other people's money. Next is how to maximize your chances of getting OPM. And that article focuses on what you need to put in a business plan. Peer-to-peer investing, part 1, that talks about crowdfunding, which is a very controversial topic. Peer-to-peer financing, part 2. And the last 2 are deal with the term sheet. If you're lucky enough to get a term sheet, you'll want to know what goes in it and what points are worth negotiating and what you can't. One is demystifying the debt term sheet, And the last is demystifying the equity term sheet. So a lot of what I would have to say this morning would be in here, so I rest as a concession to the shortness of life to these articles. As the lawyers would say, I incorporate them by reference. Thank you.
Thank you, Erwin. We have Amy Millman here from Springboard Enterprises. Thank you for coming, Amy, and please.
Thanks, Tom. So I run an organization which I call a venture catalyst. And the challenge was faced to us, probably about 14 years ago, by a bunch of Silicon Valley investors who said that there weren't any women running businesses that would be venture backable. And that became a challenge. And it recalled the time maybe a decade or so earlier than that where people would say there weren't women who could be on boards. There weren't women who were qualified to be in the C-suite. And we said, all right, let's take a page from our friends over in the Minority Business Development Council and some of the outsiders who had formed organizations that were catalysts for ramping up the minority populations into corporate and supplier diversity and other areas. And let's do it for the equity investments. I used to run during the Clinton administration, since we're all using our Clinton pedigrees here, a commission called the National Women's Business Council, and our goal was to create these bold public-private sector initiatives, taking again a page from some of the minority initiatives that have been so successful. And we were doing a program with the Federal Reserve out in Silicon Valley talking about bank lending for businesses. And we had put together a bunch of bankers and put together a bunch of entrepreneurs. And the entrepreneurs looked at us and stood up and said, this is an irrelevant meeting. And we said, well, why? You know, this is a really special moment where we could actually get some synergies together. And they said, we don't need bank lending, we need equity. But I had no idea what equity investments were unless you were talking about the stock market. And so I had to go back and do some due diligence of my own on what that meant and what that meant to these women who were starting these technology companies. And again, this was back in 99, 2000. And it was a real education for me. And I said, listen, you know, how do people find this money? It's not, they're not on the street corners. So we just happened to have a board member on the Oracle board who offered us a place to exhibit entrepreneurs if we could find them, and we figured we'd get about 50 applications for a forum that would showcase these companies, and we got 350 applications. And that was the first one we ever did. All the companies got funded, and in those days it was a lot of money, and we learned a lot from that process, that it's really about the network, and it's really about how to speak investor. And so nothing, this isn't rocket science, although some of the companies we work with are rocket scientists, but it really is about how you speak, how you present, and as a former lobbyist, I know that really well. It's what does the person across the table need to know in the language in which they speak. And so that's what we spend a lot of time working with, and we've had a lot of success. And so I'll crow about our statistics. We've had 527 companies, women-led companies, come through our program since 2000. They've raised over $6 billion for their companies. 10 are public companies now, and 83% are in business as the original entity or as merged entities, and many of them are engines of some of the largest corporations around. Some of our notable brands are things like Zipcar and Minute Clinic and iRobot, the maker of the Roomba vacuum cleaner, and then many other media, tech, and life science companies. And one of our rising stars is sitting over here to my right. TRX Systems, which you'll hear about, is one that we are very bullish on. And a good women-led team. These are the kinds of things we're looking for. And if you know anybody who's looking for for investment capital. We're not a concept stage organization. We look for companies that are looking for institutional rounds of investment, growth capital, and but we do not invest, and we do not take equity in the companies, but we refer and we recruit and we promote and we support very high growth potential women-led businesses.
Thank you, Amy. Mr. Hicks, please.
Good morning. Good morning. I'm delighted to be here today. I'm Vice President of the investment group at Ben Franklin Technology Partners. Ben Franklin is a state of Pennsylvania funded economic development organization. We do a lot of things, but primarily we are an investor in early stage Pennsylvania-based technology companies. We kind of look at technology in three sectors: IT, life sciences, and physical sciences. Any company fitting any one of those sectors with a good management team and a good concept and good idea, we're interested in talking to you. I've been a part of that organization for 20 years. For 15 of those 20 years, I've directed all of the investment activity in the organization. 15 years ago, when they said, Terry, it's your baby now, I surveyed the portfolio, and to my surprise, what percentage of the portfolio do you think was comprised of minority entrepreneurs? Take a guess, a wild guess.
2%.
Zero.
A little better than zero. Let's say not quite 1%. Not quite 1%. And that's defining minority as broadly and as liberally as you want to define it. Well, you have an African American directing the portfolio of what was then 100 companies, technology companies at the time. I said, that's not right. We have to do something about that. So I went on a real campaign to try to generate more interest in bringing minority companies into a technology portfolio. Long story short, we formed what is now known as the Minority Angel Investor Network. It is still the country's, even today, still the country's only organized network of primarily minority investors, angel investors, that invest in primarily minority-owned and led technology companies. We primarily invest in companies around the Philadelphia region, but we might go a little south, maybe further down into the D.C. area. We say on the website commutable distance. So if you're a Pennsylvania-based, southeastern Pennsylvania-based technology companies, you can come in through the Ben Franklin door. If you're not Pennsylvania-based, New York, D.C., Maryland, Delaware, you can come in through the Minority Angel Investor Network door. But we're interested in talking to you. If you have a technology deal, good management team, good concept, we're interested in talking to you.
Thank you, Mr. Hicks. Elizabeth.
Hi, my name's Libby Hess. I'm the entrepreneur here, I guess. My company, TRX Systems, develops personnel location devices for first responders and for war fighters so they can be tracked with a high degree of precision in GPS-denied areas. Meaning when a fireman or a team of firefighters go into a building, somebody can sit outside with a laptop and watch these individuals as they progress through a building, even if it's a building that has not been previously mapped, based on a device that they wear attached to their belts, and track them with a high degree of precision so they know where they are and how to get to them and how to get them out of dangerous situations. My background is that I started in working in the telecoms and high-tech world back in the early 80s in a spinoff of the Rand Corporation. This was after a few years as a social worker with the long-term unemployed in northern Vermont, and then business school, then into the high-tech world. Worked at the Hughes Corporation and satellite building business, moved here to the East Coast for Hughes Network Systems, also satellite-based communications, and then got into the startup world in the late 90s when there was lots of money available for basically any kind of wild-eyed scheme that anybody had. those days are gone, but there's still plenty of money available. It's just harder to get. You have to be more focused. You have to have a more market-oriented view, an exit-oriented view going into your financing raising than a technology-based view. So I'm here to give everybody encouragement. It takes a long time, but there are plenty of resources available at the state level, university-affiliated funds, and there are lots of individuals in the Washington area with lots of high-tech financing and successful entrepreneur experience. So take advantage of them.
Thank you very much. J.S. Gamble, Blue Venture Investors.
Sure. I'm Jay Gamble. I'm a co-leader of a private investment group known as Blue Venture Investors. Taken as individuals, we would all be labeled angel investors, but we operate as a group and run our affairs, make our decisions more like a venture capital firm. So we're somewhere in between angels and venture capital investors. In addition to that, I'm an adjunct professor at the McDonough School of Business at Georgetown. I teach in their MBA program. I actually teach 2 courses on new venture creation and launch. And I also serve on the investment advisory board for the GAP Fund at the Center for Innovative Technology in Virginia, which is a Commonwealth of Virginia funded early stage development fund. Blue Venture focuses on technology companies exclusively. We've only been around for 3 years, but in that time we have established, I'll call, a steady run rate of applications, opportunities, decision making. We receive on average 1 new business plan per business day. So this week we will, if it's an average week, and they're not all average, there are spikes and there are peaks and troughs, this week we will receive 5 new business plans. So call it 200 a year. We as a group will fund 4. And we may do more, we may do less, but our average is 4. We're in active due diligence right now with 6 companies. We have an additional 22 that are at some level of discussion with our group. So the number of opportunities are many. The avenues of approach are public, well known, and I agree with Libby that the resources are out there. And I can say that from a private standpoint, I can say that from a government standpoint. It's a matter of finding the best match, the best resource for what you want to do.
Well, thank you all. I should mention that we are streaming live, so I'd like to take a minute to invite our online audience to submit their questions as well. Christian, do they submit? Are the instructions online, or do they submit that directly to you?
They are online.
Okay. So welcome to them as well. So let's get started. I want to ask a fairly broad question of our folks who are doing direct investment, and that is, let's just talk about what angel investment is. The mention was made of friends and family and fools, and we can talk about distinguishing angel investment from that. And venture cap. I was at MMTC yesterday, and I think one of the panelists referred to venture capitalists as vampires and pimps. Was it, Erwin? It was something like that. I don't subscribe to that view necessarily, but I thought it was an interesting remark. So I'd like to talk about. I'd like one of you to sort of take it up. What really is angel investment? How does it fit in the scheme between friends and family and venture cap and private equity? Just sort of give me your thoughts on that. So who'd like to take that up first? Jay.
So this is a very difficult question because angel investors are such a broad, eclectic class. By one estimate, there are over 400,000 angel investors in the United States right now. And they come from all different backgrounds, all different orientations, different objectives. But I'll try to put some rudimentary structure around the framework so we can talk about it. Typically, an angel investor does fit in between friends, families, and fools, as Erwin eloquently put it. and before larger institutional investors, including venture capital firms. So it is a stage, but it's also an investment size. Angel investors typically invest $250,000 at the high end, $10,000 at the low end, and anywhere in between. It's a very broad range. Venture capitalists tend to invest more at the $5 million level. There are venture capital firms here in this region who won't talk to you for less than $10 million. So there's a very broad range between the friends and family stage and the venture capital stage, which everybody knows about. I'll give you a couple of quick numbers to illustrate where this gap is, or where the spot is. 1 in 10 startups enjoy an investment from an angel investor. 1 in 1,000 actually ever achieve a venture capital investment. So that just gives you a sense of the magnitude. And I will say, in terms of the logical progression, it's encouraging that 1 in 10 angel investment companies actually go on to get VC money. So that gives you a sense. I apologize, it's not a clean, crisp answer because the angel investment class is so broad and diverse. But that's an attempt.
Okay. Anybody else want to discuss that question or talk about your own investment strategy?
Well, perhaps another distinction. Angel investors, my experience has been, angel investors tend to engage more intensively with the companies in which they invest, primarily because angels are investing their own personal finances and wealth. Venture capitalists, on the other hand, aren't investing their personal wealth. They're investing the wealth of their limited partners, their investors. So not to say that they aren't concerned with the companies in which they invest, because they have to obviously deliver returns. But I have seen in just my personal experience that the relationship between an angel investor and their investee is a much more intensive relationship than that between the venture capitalists and their investee company.
Is there also frequently a sort of a geographic nexus, more likely to have a geographic nexus with the angel investors than with the private equity? So there is, both the familiarity, but they're also sort of in the door perhaps more frequently.
And Frank, that raises a question. I think we spoke about this last week when I was doing some research before this conference. I ran across and skimmed a Harvard study that concluded that angel-funded startups have historically been less likely to fail than companies that obtained other forms of initial funding. And for me, it's like, well, money is money. So they were comparing it to firms that actually got money, but they were saying angel-funded firms tended to be more successful at the start stage. Why do you all think that is?
If I could speak a little bit to that, and I don't want to sort of preempt the actual investors here because they know better than I do, but I read that well, I didn't read the study, but I read the story about the study.
Right.
And I have to admit that one of the first thoughts that popped years ago, I had someone say to me that that they had read that people who drove Volvos were less likely to have accidents, and so Volvos must be safer cars. My thought was, I think that doesn't say so much about the car; it says about the kind of people who drive Volvos. I think people who buy Volvos are not going to be drag racing at night. They're probably driving their kids, and I think that with the results of this, it makes sense because I would think, and again, I let the experts speak in, but I think that companies that have successfully obtained angel investing are companies that have probably undergone several events. One is they have had an investment professional sort of review their plan, review their operation, and thought, this works. This is something I want to invest in. And and secondly, once that investment happens, they frequently will have the benefit of the expertise that investor brings to bear, the sort of the involvement that Terry was talking about. I mean, these investors bring a wealth of information and experience that the entrepreneur can then use. So it's logical to me that those that have angel investments, have a more greater likelihood of success because they've gone through this process, whereas the others don't have the benefit of that.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think one other aspect of that, too, is that angel investors tend to be more knowledgeable about specific areas of technology. They became investors sometimes because they were involved in successful startups or successful technology companies, and they want to get out and do it again. They love what they're doing, and they're willing to put their own money and their own time into it. They're more selective about who they're going to invest with because there's a closer professional and quasi-mentoring relationship between an angel investor and its investing company than there is between the more traditional institutional venture capital funds. So I think it's both the car and the driver.
So actually, let's take it the other way around. Maybe the reason why is because the companies are smart enough to find people who actually have the expertise they need in order to invest, which is why they're more successful, because they pick the investors who have an expertise in that area. It's not just about the transaction. Mm-hmm. And so if you look at TRX, they're very careful in cherry picking their investors because they know they will bring their warm money. They bring that warm money, that expertise that they need to grow that company. So, I give the brownie points to the entrepreneurs who are smart enough to find the exact investor who has an expertise in the area that they need to grow.
Yeah, but not every company. I've found not every company has the luxury of being able to cherry pick their investors. A lot of the companies and I don't know, Tom, you've run into this with companies that come into OCBO, but that, they'll take the fool, and it may be because they are themselves a fool. That may be true.
But he's talking about successful companies.
Right.
And so the successful companies are the ones that know how to pick the right investors. Just like the team, talking about the teams.
And I think with the right investor, there's going to be more of an emotional connection between the investor and the company. I tell folks that want to get involved in angel investing, don't necessarily get involved in angel investing just for return. Because angel investing is not for the faint of heart. It's extremely risky. There has to be some psychic return from angel investing, something that you enjoy over and above getting the 10x, because very few of our deals, let's be honest, get 10x's. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, if I could, I just want to build on Terry's comment. I absolutely agree. And if you think about it, for an angel investor to make the investment of their own personal funds, they know going in that they risk losing all of it. And so generally for them to make that decision, there's something more than just the chance. I mean, honestly, you get better odds if you go to Las Vegas and put it all on red. So there has to be something more there than just that chance of a payoff sometime in the future. I have seen angel investors invest because they love the product. They fall in love with the product. And all else is secondary. I've seen angel investors invest because they fall in love with the entrepreneur and feel that this is a person that they can really relate to, and they will be very supportive. These are all motivators for that angel investor to make the commitment. But once they make the commitment, generally they will follow through to do their best to make sure it's successful. That doesn't mean they're geniuses or that they're going to have 100% or 1,000 batting average. That just means they're going to be more committed than a passive investor. By the way, I have seen strictly passive angel investments as well, so they do exist.
By the way, I'm going to get to some of these questions. We've got them fast and furious. I've gotten a few questions that are sort of FCC and sort of regulatory related. I'm going to put those aside, and for those of you who've asked those questions, we can have an opportunity offline. This is really not going to be. We're not going to be talking a lot about sort of FCC policy here. So I just wanted to say that. I think Terry and Jay, you all raised the issue of risk, and so I wanted to get at that just very briefly. Given the high level of risk from the angel investor side, what kind of return are you typically looking at, and over what time period?
Well, I'll answer it this way. I have a portfolio of 121 companies right now. Typically, the company is in my portfolio for an average period of four to 6 years. The average return on a deal is about 1.2 times cash on cash. So it means I'm getting my money back plus a little extra kick. Some angel investors would look at that and say, "My God, you're basically just getting your money back." That to me is a good return. For the stage at which we invest. We're investing really at the seed stage and investing in the form of convertible debt. So not to get too technical, we're not investing exclusively in equity. In fact, most of our deals are not equity. So if I get my convertible debt principal and interest back and a little sweetener on the warrant that I throw in there, then I'm delighted. Now, honestly,
I'm surprised by that.
Well, I've had some really honest conversations with some investors who say, if I get in this environment, if I get 100% of my money back, I'm happy.
But Terry's saying the long terms that there's always a lot of jargon in this. Angel investors and also venture capitalists are very patient people, and that's why they call it patient money, because they're in it for the long term. There definitely aren't these short-term successes on that.
Jay?
Yeah, so our target is 3 to 5x in 3 to 5 years. However, not every angel investment group has an explicit target, and even if they do, oftentimes there are exceptions. There are angel investors that will invest in anything that has the potential to be big. And by big, I mean has an exit for over $100 million or more. And they'll go for that, even though the odds of success are extremely low. But there are other angel investors that are very happy with, I'm sorry, I'm using a lot of baseball terms here. Lots of investors are very happy with singles and doubles. So a 1x return of your money, that would be a single. 2x return, a double, so forth. But so again, very broad spectrum.
I'm just wondering, because I'm hearing a little sort of split, but in the case, what your expectation with Terry, whether, I mean, you're working with a sort of your organization has. Do you think it's fair to say has sort of a policy mandate? I mean, as far as for the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania and that sort of thing. So it seems to me that for you a success may have a slightly different definition than somebody who is just out there in the field, because for you a success is economic development in the Commonwealth.
True.
Right.
But I would stack my investment record though up against.
No. I'm not questioning that, but I mean, yeah.
If I could just add one thing, in terms of objective, perhaps I'm stating the obvious, but notice that there is an end point to the investment horizon that we are targeting. It's very difficult to find angel investors to invest in a business that is ongoing forever, even if it generates a nice stream of dividends. Most angel investors are looking for an exit point where the investment is monetized or liquidated, hopefully through the sale of the company to an acquirer at a very attractive return. So I just wanted to make that point.
I'm going to get to some of these questions from the audience. So Hopefully I'll pronounce names correctly, but we won't know if I don't, so I'll just go at it. Deborah Castellero, founder of Bilingual Children Enterprises. She says, I run a family tech startup, early stage. Help me identify angel investors who make social impact investments. My ideal investor is Latino, someone who sees value in the Hispanic market and who is interested in the edutainment space. Can anybody address that?
What's the location?
What's the location? New York.
So there's quite a lot of groups that, you have, it's like a needle in a haystack, to be honest with you, to find the right people. You sort of have to be out there. We always say entrepreneurship is not a spectator sport. You really have to be out there, and you never know. You'd be sitting in a room with about 100 investors, or with the whole Blue investor group there, and what you get is one person in that group who has a specific expertise or interest that can drive the whole investment for the group. But how will you know that? I mean, unless you really do an amazing amount of research on every single aspect of these, whether it's New York Angels or Golden Seeds or Common Angels or Gotham Angels or Blue Ventures, I mean, you really don't know unless you're out there trying. And I think that you guys would also probably say that that's a little different for venture investors, because you never want to do that. You don't want to do a random rifle shot with venture investors.
No guarantees, but there's a group called Investor Circle that does double bottom line type investing. So you might want to take a look at their website.
Another one is just because of the...
Yeah, Investors Circle.
Investor Circle.
Okay. Is I think with regard to it being sort of an Hispanic Latino focus, there are organizations that focus specifically on that, and for example, I know several high net worth Latinos who came out of the 90s, many in the broadcasting field, but who wanted to focus on angel investing, on creating, in some cases, private equity funds that were focused on Hispanic-owned companies and the like. There's a group that gets together. They are not angel investors, but they're called the New America Alliance, and they are basically comprised of high net worth individuals, Hispanics, who do things such as create scholarship funds and deal with some financial Wall Street issues, political policy initiatives. They're very involved with getting Hispanics appointed to high-level positions. So there are avenues out there where you can focus on that particular issue, and you can Google it. You can contact me, but there are groups out there. There's a variety of them out there if that's your focus. So.
There's also a group out of University of Pennsylvania. No, Terry, you may not. It's a new edu EDU group that is only looking at educational properties at a UPenn. I don't know the exact name of it, but they just had a conference about a month ago. Mm-hmm. A woman named Bobby Kirshen runs it, and again, they're looking for early stage properties in the EDU space.
Yeah, I would just add that I think there are several different ways to attack it, and I would advise you pursue all of them simultaneously. If you just started to go down the path of social impact investing, very quickly you'll start to see there's a vibrant community out there, and they may not all be in the New York or Northeast corridor, but they are out there, and you may actually connect through some other indirect way back into that group. And then education is another. I mean, there's a VC firm here in this area. They specialize in education investments, education technology primarily, but they are part of that ecosphere, and they could put you in touch with the right people. I mean, one example, South by Southwest in Austin has a full day on just education. Well, you might take a trip down to Austin and find somebody sitting next to you from New York who is interested in it. I just made that up, but that's a hypothetical. My point is, you really have to attack it from multiple angles. To build on Amy's point, you got to get out there and sort of smoke out the leads. Eventually, I think you'll find a very vibrant group in New York that may be interested in social impact or education or both, and then that's where you start to focus your efforts.
Another resource is the Angel Capital Association. I think it's www.aca.either.com or .org, but it's the trade association for the organized angel groups, and they actually have it by geographic region. So that might be helpful. It'll lead you directly to the organization's website, and you can read the types of deals that they're looking for. Yeah. Angel Capital Association. If you just put that in Google, the site will come up.
Yeah, I don't think it's not ACA.
AngelCapitalAssociation.org.
Okay. Yeah, AngelCapitalAssociation.org.
And then there's the Angel Resources Institute.org too.
You know, we may want to move our mics a little bit closer, make sure. I think, is everybody hearing them clearly? No. So okay, there we go. All right. Okay. Thank you for your question, Deborah. This one is from Sam Abrams, Boss Communications Network, Guyana, South America. My company is unique. We are located outside of the U.S., but work very closely with several U.S.-based companies. How do I successfully gain attention and secure growth capital to fuel more robust growth? From Mr. Abrams. There we go. That's right. Thank you. Miss Abrams, sorry. We met earlier. Okay. Does anyone want to take that one on?
Do you, as angel investors, look at international opportunities?
Well, so I was going to say, it might have been Erwin or Frank who mentioned that angel investors tend to be more geographic. No, I'm sorry, it was Terry. Commutable.
Yeah.
Commutable. Yeah. That is a smaller subset of investor who would actually look at an investment outside of the U.S., but they do exist. If you're working with companies in the U.S., you might try to approach investors through them. Another aspect of gaining attention from angel investors is generally they pay much more attention to trusted sources. So if you can find through your contacts in the U.S. Somebody who would introduce you to the angel investor, that's a much, much better position to be in than to just approach them directly. I personally, I don't know of any groups that are focused on South America right now, but I do know there are angel groups in South America who focus on their own geographic areas.
I would say that there's this is not an angel group, and I echo that what was stated earlier about with angel investors, there's sort of a geographic component, a commutable component. But if you go a little upstream, there is an organization called LAVCA, the Latin American Venture Capital Association, and it is comprised of private equity venture capital firms whose focus, many of whom are based here in the U.S., specifically on investments in Latin America, infrastructure, software, you name it, and they might have an avenue to sort of an angel group that likewise is focused on Latin America, because I have run into individuals who are specifically looking for making investments, in their case mostly telecom infrastructure in Latin America. Usually they have a familiarity with Latin America, so that might be a way to start. It's LAVCA, Latin American Venture Capital Association. If you Google it, and they have conferences all throughout the Americas, at least 2 or 3 times a year.
And I would check with the Angel Capital Association as well, because their groups are not limited to the U.S.
Also check the Multilateral Investment Fund, MIF. It's part of the Inter-American Development Bank. They're real focused on angel investments and developing infrastructure for angel capital in pretty much all the Latin American countries. Mm-hmm.
There are also restrictions just generally on alien ownership that's in the Communications Act and the FCC. If it's the broadcast property, aeronautical license, et cetera, there are restrictions on crowdfunding on foreign investors, et cetera. So just heads up.
Okay, I want to.
I was just going to do a quick follow on my head director related to this international interest. I represent somebody directly, a South African company, that wants to do telecommunications development throughout Africa. And we're looking specifically, one of the reasons I'm here, is we're looking specifically for investors and strategic partners, and particularly those minority ownership here in the United States, strategic working partners with us.
Okay. We may just make sure that everybody can hear that question. We might come back to it. It was we can definitely return to it. What I wanted to do very briefly, and thank you for those responses. Elizabeth, I wanted to ask you, as someone here who's been on the seeking funding side of the equation, talk a little bit about what you have found to be the advantages of angel investment over other possible sources of funding, and what have you found, if appropriate, to be some of the pitfalls?
Well, angel investors tend to have a higher level of actual hands-on experience in investment in particular fields. I think that they are more knowledgeable than the typical venture capital investor in terms of actually having worked in an operational role somewhere. They probably have actually worked, maybe even walked in your own shoes. So the benefit, that is, of course, a double-sided coin. It's good because they understand what you're doing. They can bring some real expertise and real connections within very specific industry areas. The flip side of that is that they may actually want to be more closely involved than you would choose for them otherwise to be in your activities. But having said that, I think that the benefits of having real operational experience and strong industry connections are far outweigh the potential pitfall of having too much involvement. I think also because they are investing their own money, they make a much more deliberate decision about your business, and the whole due diligence process and the whole pitch to an angel investor is a really good exercise in getting a really solid business plan and a solid pitch package. It's something that, because they are investing on their own behalf rather than investing in sort of this pool of money, they're going to be far more deliberate in the decision. And that's one of the other pitfalls. It may take longer than you want to for the transaction to happen. This can stretch out over a period, allow at least 6 months if you're looking for money for the whole thing to get through all of the hurdles and evaluations and then all the documentation. But I think it's preferable because you have a stronger individual relationship with people who have good industry connections. It's great to have smart venture capital money, but basically they're not going to work for you the way an angel investor will.
Expanding on that a little bit, there's a question from the audience that talks about the idea all money is not good money. And this is for the entire panel to sort of chime in on. And we've been talking about this generally, but when we're looking at the menu of money options, which makes it sound like they're easily attainable, but not, right? When you're looking at the menu, do you all sort of recommend one over the other? And I understand that this is going to depend on, the type of company, where they are. So probably can say that up front. But do you recommend one type of investment vehicle over another? And what questions should our entrepreneurs be asking themselves when they're making a decision to seek funding? So who wants to tackle that one?
So in our MBA class at Georgetown, we actually teach a whole section on this very question, and that's about 3 hours. I don't think we want to go into that much detail, but there is definitely a pecking order in raising funds, and just in general, the less dilutive of your ownership that funding is, the better. That's a general rule to follow. The best source, far and away above all others, is revenue coming in the door from paying customers. That is the best source of funding, and I will go for that every day if I could. Then you start to get into grants and loans. Those of you from this area recognize the term SBIR as very rich sources of funds from several of the government agencies through the SBIR program. These are all grants. They are non-dilutive loans to the extent that you can service them and support them and not crater your business or your credit record. They are non-dilutive and preferable to equity. Once you get into equity, then there are convertible notes, there are priced rounds, there's common stock. If you can find an investor to invest in common stock, that's better than preferred stock. The most expensive money is preferred stock, and generally angel investors will prefer that. The most within preferred stock, the most expensive is preferred stock investment from a venture capital firm for a number of reasons. So I just compressed a 3-hour course into maybe a minute.
Anybody else?
And there are other views of this. I don't want to say.
Pretty comprehensive.
So.
Can I add a thing that's most important before you even? It's probably the pre-course to what you do is the question of ownership, the question of control. And you in order to even make any decision about whether you're going to go for investment capital, you have to really look inside yourself and say, how do I feel about control of this business? If I am okay with losing control of 100% of this business, then that's the next step that you go in. We actually used to give this, what we called our equity capital assessment test, which we based on a Babson new venture creation workbook at some point, and that Jeff Timmons had put together, and said, test yourself to see how you actually feel comfortable about losing control of your business. And you'd be surprised how many people said, well, wait a minute, I like to take investors, but I absolutely do not want to lose 100% of the business.
Yeah, I could try. I'm really happy that Amy brought that up because I was going to dumb it down a bit. I spoke. I moderated a panel at the MMTC Access to Capital conference yesterday on digital media, and there was a guy from Opportunity Capital who, essentially was saying, one of the biggest rubs that they run into, is that for the entrepreneur, this is your, frequently this is your baby. This is your brainchild. You love this business like it was your child, and like your child, you don't want anybody telling your child how it should be doing its business, and or telling you how to parent. This is my, I'll take your money, but don't tell me how to run my business. And I do think that going into it, there is sort of an emotional, psychological element to it where you have to be ready and accept and have a certain degree of acceptance to the fact that when you bring in these equity investments, whether they be angel or private equity or venture capital, that you are going to be sharing control of this business. It's not going to be just your business anymore. There is going to be some, frequently, not always, frequently some dilutive effect, but there are positive sides to that because again as Libby had mentioned earlier, the angel investor will frequently bring expertise, will bring knowledge, there's something, so you have to sort of accept that contribution aside from the monetary contribution, the sort of the experiential contribution. But I with the companies that I've seen, there is that. There's a little bit of a rub. Erwin gave an experience, talked about, the money investor and the entrepreneur, not getting along. I question whether others here agree with me. I've sort of seen this kind of troika where frequently where there's the money guy. There's the visionary, and then there's sometimes the third leg of the stool is there's the operational guy, or woman, and they bring very different things to the table, but all of which may be critically important. The angel investor brings experience, obviously their money, and the experience of operating, running a business, specifically potentially in that geographic area, in that industry. The visionary, he's up in the clouds. He's sky's the limit. And we can do anything. These Orville and Wilbur Wright, we're going to actually put an airplane on wings on a bicycle and make it fly. And it may work. The day-to-day, the operational guy, they're there to sort of, they're dealing with payroll, they're dealing with sales, they're dealing with they're down in the trenches. So and where it works is where those three people, where there's a harmony. And where it doesn't work is when somebody feels like their space is being intruded on, and they have an inability to sort of let go. So I think that dynamic is far more important than people give it credit for, because interpersonal problems can create more difficulties in a business than you think.
I think Amy's question is an excellent for anyone, sort of a threshold question. Before you start looking for other people's money, which necessarily means losing some control, you ponder the question of how comfortable you are running a business where there are all sorts of restrictions. That old phrase, the golden rule, them that has the gold makes the rule, really applies here. Take a look at the articles mentioned on term sheets. They all contain restrictions on the way that you run your business. And in the eyes of the provider of the equity or the loan, they're absolutely essential for protection. So that's something that's really worthwhile. And then it's going to depend as to what level of restrictions you're going to have based on the funding source.
Next question I have, I think foremost goes to the investors, but I think everybody on the panel has a perspective on this. Take it in two parts. Let's talk about particularly the angel investment relationship, and I'd like our investors to talk about sort of the success stories. I mean, what have you looked for? How do you define a winner? But the other side of that coin is cautionary tales. Folks who've come before you seeking funding and just don't have their stuff together. So I'd certainly like the investors to speak to that, but I think everybody has a perspective on successes and failures in seeking investment, angel investment funding. I think Terry, I think you gave the stat. Who gave the stat 4 out of 200 in a year? Was that Jay or was that Terry?
But go ahead, Terry.
Yeah, we had a company. I can say it is public. Boomi, which was purchased by Dell a couple years ago. It was a very, very nice transaction that made quite a bit of money for the principals. We had been dealing with that company for, I'm going to say we got involved in that deal back in the early part of the decade. And there were two individuals at the time. They had developed a neat software package. And the interesting thing about that deal is that they struggled for a long period of time. I mean, we stayed with that deal from, let's say, 2002 up until a couple years ago. They went through a number of different business models. The term is pivoted now. You hear that many entrepreneurs talking about pivoting, changing business models. And they did that. They pivoted, must have been 5 or 6 times to try to get the business model right. Went through a lot of money. We invested through a number of rounds. But we found that the entrepreneurs were persistent. They brought in different people when it was necessary. They brought in new advisors. They shook up the board a little bit just to get the right people around the board that brought the appropriate resources to bear. And finally, magic struck. Dell took a look at the product, liked it, and did a transaction. But it took the better part of a decade through a number of business models, through a number of financings to get that deal done. But again, the group, the entrepreneurs, stuck with it. They knew they had a technology that was promising and was good and that somebody would acknowledge and recognize someday. They had patient investors who loved the guys, knew they were smart, knew it would work someday, and stuck with them through multiple rounds of funding. And it worked out. Fortunately, it worked out.
Yeah, just a couple of factors that we look for, and these are no guarantees of success, Tom, but they tend to correlate more with successful outcomes. First of all, we focus on the management team, and I'll underscore team. There's a lot of discussion about the CEO, tons of articles about the CEO of this, and the CEOs of these disruptive companies. They're the ones that get on CNBC, but really it's the team that will determine whether they're successful or not. And we, because we're early stage investors, we expect that there will be gaps in the team, but we look for the ability and the willingness to assemble a team and to fill those gaps longer term. And as Terry pointed out, there's no guarantee that will be the same team in place 2-3 years from now, but it's that ability to recognize the need for those skills and those roles and the ability to pull them together. That's what we look for. We look for a product or a technology that solves a real customer problem. And I can't tell you how many companies come in front of us and say, we've got this great technology, but they cannot articulate the problem that they're solving for a customer. And then third, and by the way, we have a much longer list. These are just sort of the top 3. We look for traction. That's the term of art, the slang term. We look for paying customers who are willing to pay their own good money for that service or that product, because that helps verify number 2, which is that it is a product or service or technology that actually solves a problem and creates or offers value to customers. If we see those 3 things, then we start to go to the rest of the list. But if we don't see those 3 things, we don't go much further in our discussions. I'll offer a couple of cautionary tales, I think was your phrase. One thing that throws up a red flag is when we see a first-time entrepreneur telling us that this product or service is great and their plans are to go public. They may in fact do that, and I will be the first one to acknowledge the genius that was required to achieve that. But the odds of going public in an environment, well, say the last 10 years, they're just so remote that it questions the judgment of the person who made that statement. So what we look for is a clear roadmap to an exit, which is when the investors will actually see the return on their investment. And if along that roadmap there are multiple strategic alliances with companies that are potential acquirers, that just adds credibility to the exit roadmap, as opposed to we're going to work on this thing, we're going to get 5 million users, no revenue, and eventually we'll go public. It happens. It's just the odds of it happening are just so remote. It's difficult to invest in that type of scenario.
Let me add one thing to the cautionary list. Never say you have no competition. Never, ever. That's a red flag to every investor.
Because even no competition is competition. That means it's status quo, and why would anybody change from what they're doing already?
Okay. Elizabeth, you had mentioned earlier, I think, and this has been alluded to here, you said a market-oriented view, and as Jay mentioned, exit strategy. You said an exit-oriented view. From your perspective, can you comment on that?
Yeah, that investors, while they may be called angel investors, they're not angels in terms of just sprinkling gold around. They do want a return. And the thing that you need to articulate is not only your product and your technology, but you have to show a really strong understanding of the market, plenty of statistics, and ideally some demonstration of potential customer support as well. Some engagement with somebody who is a recognized entity who will say, yes, we agree with this concept, and if they could produce this product, we might actually buy it from them. So the product has to be there. You have to understand your market. You also have to understand what your potential exits could be. And there must be more than one. You can't, just as it's not a real business plan to say we're going to go public, it's not a real business plan to say we're going to sell this to Apple, period, end of sentence. You have to have a knowledge of who the potential users of the technology, and at the industry level, who the potential buyers of the entire company might be. So while that seems like something that you would work towards as you develop your business, you also have to understand it as you're going in, or you won't be able to really get somebody to give you money because they do want to get a return on their funds.
Thank you. This question is from Steve Roberts, who's a television broadcaster, and he says, we're here at the FCC today. Are there any of you that will invest or fund radio or TV stations?
We do not.
I would say, as a category, it's a tough environment. What we typically look for is a track record of excellent exits. So if it is a radio or TV property in a market that has a history of recent attractive exits, starting at 10x, just to give you a number, and higher, then sure, we would look at it. But I'm not an expert in the field, but my sense is that it's tough to find a market where you see that type of track record today.
This is a. Oh, sure.
for the type of, I would think, I don't want to put words into anybody else's mouth, for the type of investing that many angel investors and so private equity investors are looking for, the return on investment in broadcasting is just not going to be there, and you're in broadcasting you're going to be looking, there's economies of scale, you're looking for like a big roll up, and I think that's sort of the wrong target for what many angel investors are looking for. It's also, depending, it's a regulated industry, so you have to take that into consideration. But I think there are investment there's capital available for broadcasters, but I'm not sure that angel investing is it.
Okay. This question comes from Susan Schwerd. Did I pronounce that correctly? Thank you. Brilliant Broadcasting, LLC. We had created a crowdfunding model, but were advised by an SEC attorney that current law does not allow crowdfunding for station purchase. Is there any creative model that has been used for acquisition?
Is that true? That it's not allowed? The crowdfunding or acquiring radio stations that way? For the purchase.
I'm sorry, you lost me a little bit there. So start from the beginning. You were told that you're crowdfunding to purchase a radio station. Is that right? And then, in addition to angel investing, and that you were told that can't be done for 18 months, or that that's the part I missed.
Which law? The FCC law. Right.
The current FCC law says
no. SEC, Security and Exchange Commission.
Oh.
Okay.
Are you starting with
which is why I felt comfortable asking it.
The Jobs Act created a crowdfunding mechanism, and the SEC still, I don't even think they've proposed rules yet.
Yeah, yesterday they announced that
yes.
if you, for accredited investors.
But they haven't adopted rules on
Didn't
the remaining
they
parts.
issue the rules yesterday?
No.
Right.
Then there is the amendment to 906, which would allow associations to make general solicitation. What they did yesterday was approve the final rule on general solicitation, waiving the general solicitation.
Right.
Under 506, which is a little different than crowdfunding.
Right.
But isn't that what she was just talking about? So you could do crowdfunding with only accredited investors.
Right.
This
is not a radio or TV issue. This is a accredited investor issue.
It's not against your investment. It's how you get the money.
Yeah, the FCC does not have regulations in that area. They have ownership regulations.
I mean, that's right. I mean, if what you're looking to buy is radio and television, you have to keep. There are certain ownership restrictions that the Federal Communications Commission, this place, brings to bear. Not the least of which are your investors U.S. citizens or not, U.S. companies or not, and if not, how much are they going to own? But it's in terms of the actual crowdfunding, mechanism, the FCC doesn't get into that.
Okay. I'm going to return for a moment to Mr. Huber's question. He had a follow-up when we were talking about foreign investment. And since we couldn't hear it, I'll read it out loud here. Mr. Huber says, I represent a South African company interested in developing a telecom company throughout Africa. We are looking for investors, strategic partners with minority ownership in the U.S. Would there be angel investors or venture capitalists interested in that type of investment? That's again from Dan Huber. Is that something that we can address here?
Well, so yeah, the answer is yes. The challenge is finding them. There are, if you just start to scour the web, there are workshops and webinars on investing in Africa, and I'm not saying that it's a 100% hit, but that would be a place to start. I mean, I received a survey a month ago asking would Blue be interested in investing in opportunities in Africa, and I replied that under the right circumstances, yes. However, honestly, those circumstances would be so tight. I can't, and they're competing with other opportunities here in the D.C. area. So for us, it's probably a remote possibility. But there are investors out there. I mean, it's clearly somebody responded to that survey in a much more enthusiastic way than we did. I can't give you a direct way to find them.
You know, if I could just, I have to think that, you know, that if there is a Latin American Venture Capital Association, I would be very surprised if there was not a similar organization dealing with Africa, or that there are resources out there. I mean, again, going back to put a little plug back for the Clinton administration, when I was director of OCBO, the then chairman of the FCC, Bill Kennard, you know, there was a real big effort to make a push on investment in Africa. Bill Kennard and others actually went to South Africa with the then head of the then chief of the International Bureau. So there had been a big push, and I have to think that that skipping ahead, 15 years later, that there hasn't been quite a bit of advancement at that. Having said that, I would think, I mean, the first questions I want to ask is, well, there's Africa and there's Africa. Do I want to invest in Africa? Well, what part of Africa? Where are we? Telecom in Africa? What telecom? What is it? I mean, that's you're. I know this is for purposes of your question. You're dealing with generalities, but I think whether or not you're going to have private equity firms or others that are going to be interested in what your client or your are partnering with what they're doing, there's a lot of questions there, and so I think it's gonna depend.
You should check for a group called Endeavor. I think they're .org, and they have these investor, sort of like a president's organization, where they have these groups that support entrepreneurs or bring entrepreneurs to certain countries. Africa is an area of great interest to them. They're based in New York, so might be another way to find out who's doing business. The other group out of the Commerce Department that does trade missions of U.S. investors to various countries. It's part of, I guess, the International Trade Administration, I guess it's called. There's a guy there named Randy Mitchell, takes these trade missions. I don't know if any of you have gone on them, but he knows who all of the investors are who invest in each country.
Right.
Trade Administration over at the Department of Commerce.
But that's what, and I think that's what when Bill, then Chairman Kennard went. I mean, I think Larry Irving, who was running NTIA at the time, and others. That was all. That's what was going on. Was a sort of trade.
Randy Mitchell is the guy who runs that, or does those trade missions.
Let's move. We've got just a couple more minutes in our session. I've got a couple more questions I do want to get to with you, and then we can give a brief overview before we break for lunch and then come back for the afternoon sessions. But here, just a couple follow-up questions. Jay mentioned that there is an endpoint to the investment horizon, typically the sale of the company to an acquirer. Can the panel identify other exit strategies for angel investment that do not involve the sale of the company? And are exit strategies expressly agreed to prior to accepting the investment? Can anyone address that one?
Well, we could be taken out by a venture capitalist. Many of my exits have been through a larger funding round coming in and taking us out, which we didn't mind.
But what about the company exit?
Oh, I'm sorry. I maybe misunderstood the question. The investor exit or the company?
I think it was. I think it's the. I'm interpreting as the company exit, but
no, I'm interpreting it as the investor.
The investor
exit. This person wants to keep control of their company.
Right. Yeah. Okay. The investor exit.
Not have to sell their company, but still get the private equity group the return on their investment and maybe limit.
Okay.
Right. Yeah. That's how I read the question.
Right. So I've gotten out of a number of deals. Because in most of those deals, I'm dead anyway. So they want to clean up the balance sheet. So I'm taken out at a venture round. They get a clean balance sheet, and they can move on with their plan for the company.
Okay.
So if the question's from the standpoint of the entrepreneur or the CEO, it's difficult to find private investors who will invest in the hopes of getting a steady stream of dividends, which would be the alternative. They exist. They're out there. I know a group of investors that are interested in high-interest debt, and that is an avenue. It doesn't require an exit, doesn't require giving up control, but it does require a lot of other covenants that may be worse. So, yes, it is possible.
I mean, I would think there's a merger of the company, which may not involve a total with another company, which may not entirely involve just a complete acquisition of the company. But I do, and of course there's bankruptcy. But I don't think. I think that one of the reasons why you get the eye roll, I would think you get the eye roll when you walk in and say, "Hey, I've got this great idea, and then we're going to do an IPO." And the person, when I hear that the person's exit strategy is an IPO, they're thinking, "I'm going to keep my company. You're going to get your money back. We're going to do an IPO, but I'm going to keep my company." And I think part of this is to are you in it for the money? Are you in it for the return on your own personal investment, sweat equity investment, or are you there to run the company? Because I think that certainly the equity investors are there to get a return on their monetary investment, and you have to, you have to sort of ask yourself, is my goal in life to run this company forever or to make a nice profit from a great idea and then sell it? But I have to understand that, ultimately at the end of the day, I'm going to be letting go and I'm going to be selling this company. And this comes up, that's not necessarily a bad thing. This has come up before. This came up. I had a conversation with Larry Irving, who I'd mentioned before. He was the Assistant Secretary of Commerce for telecommunications during the Clinton administration, and we were talking about seeing as how the issue is women and minority ownership in companies. There was some concern about the number of minority owners, say in broadcasting, had decreased, and I said, well, if it decreases, is that a bad thing? If the reason why it decreases is that you have now a bunch of extremely wealthy former minority broadcasters, who now will reinvest their money in new business. In other words, is there wealth creation there? Is that the end result? So, I think you have to ask yourself, is my goal here to run this company for the rest of my life, or is it to have a good return on my investment, in which case you have to deal with the fact that selling the company, that's probably the way what's going to happen.
Well, and selling the company is also an opportunity to start another one.
Right, exactly.
Do it
exactly.
again. Yeah, I liked it the first time. It was a lot of fun, a lot of hard work, paid off. You must have other ideas.
Right.
Do it
That's
again.
how angel investors are born.
Right.
That
Do it again.
I have another question. This is from Terrence Scott, Innovators Marketing, which is an online video communications company. Do partnerships with nonprofit organizations work for or against the company looking for capital?
What does that mean, partnerships?
As
Um,
a customer?
Working closely with them. Sometimes the market that we actually reach through online videos, we can reach that through a nonprofit organization. So sometimes we're actually in a partnership. Sometimes they actually become a client.
So the entity in which the investor is investing is for-profit or non-profit?
For-profit.
Okay.
Does it matter who you
my
partner
question is
with?
simply, if you're looking at our overall structure and you see that we're involved with nonprofits, does that work for or against, or does it matter?
Are they
It's a
paying you?
customer.
Are they
In some cases, yes. So,
revenues?
I don't think it matters if it's a customer paying.
Okay.
But you don't. Is the nonprofit your partner, or are they your customer, or are
in
they?
some cases, they're partners. In some cases, they're customers.
I think you need a tax lawyer.
We have them, so.
Yeah, good.
Good.
Yeah, as long as you're getting out there. If they're a distribution partner, that's even more fabulous. If you're,
Yes, exactly.
if they're a paying customer, that's even better.
Right.
It doesn't matter who you're working with as long as you get your product out there.
Okay, I'm going to go one more. This is a very basic question. It's regarding entrepreneurs. How important is it to have skin in the game, your own money? And what percentage of the total funding should the entrepreneurs contribute to attract angel investment, if that matters?
Absolutely skin in the game. We require it in every deal.
Okay.
In fact, for every dollar that we invest in a company, we require a dollar coming from another source. And we'd like some percentage of that matching dollar to come from the entrepreneur himself or herself.
What was the second part of the question?
It was just
What percentage?
what percentage of the total funding should they contribute?
As much as possible.
As much as possible.
The more the CEO is invested in the company, the more likely that they will be committed to a successful outcome.
And then the most important aspect about this, and I don't know if they'll agree with me, but it's something really important to me, is that you value that investment. Because they basically are going to value their own investment a lot higher than what you would value your own investment. And I've had people say, well, we're looking for investment, but they don't value how much they've put into the business. Now, that's not to say that's not negotiable. It's just if you don't value it at all, nobody else is going to value it.
Well, we've gone a little bit over, but I'd like to even go over a little bit further, because I'd like each of the panelists to kind of give us a brief summary. What is your basic advice to entrepreneurs seeking funding from angel investors? First part of that, and second part of that is sort of generally speaking, what resources are available to them in sort of finding, as one questioner asked, the nest of angel investors. Where do you find them? Where do you look? And how should you be prepared when you meet them? And that's just, if each of you can kind of give your overview, and then I think we can move to our break.
I'll be very brief. The most important thing to have in seeking investors is paying customers, above all else. Secondly, where to find angels. Easiest way, find attorneys and accounting firms that specialize in early stage companies and become a client or become a friend. All of the attorneys and accountants that deal with early stage companies have a Rolodex, a directory of early stage investors who are necessary to pay the company, to invest in the companies to pay their fees. Fastest way to find angel investors. But there's also the Angel Capital Association, other organized groups of angels that are out there on the web.
Yeah, for broad sources of information, angelcapitalassociation.org is good. Also, if you're going into traditional venture capital firms, they can also help steer you towards investors who might be more appropriate. And there are loads of technology investors in this area. Don't forget about state publicly funded organizations, state departments of business development, and SBIRs through federal agencies. So think of it, if you're thinking of it in terms of getting money to fund your development, think of it a little more broadly than just angel capital. SBIRs are a great way for technologies to be developed with just essentially it's free money.
Yeah, I always advise folks that are looking to raise money to make sure, first of all, that you have a very solid team. Investors are investing in people at the end of the day. Now, it means that you need to have, in our case, someone who's very solid technologically, because we're investing in technology, and someone that knows how to get that technology out into the market. Someone who can raise money, because in most cases it's going to take multiple rounds of money to get that product out there. And the team doesn't have to include just people that are on payroll. We're looking for people who can put together a solid board of directors and/or a board of advisors. So we as investors are looking at that entire team. The other thing I tell folks to be able to do is to tell your story very succinctly. You know, the 3-minute or even in some cases the 60-second elevator pitch. You ought to be able to very succinctly deliver whatever it is, whatever your proposition is, in 60 seconds. Right up to the 5th floor on the elevator.
So the most important thing to know about dealing with any kind of investors is that it's the most expensive money you can get. They're taking a piece of your real estate. They're taking a piece of your product. They own it. They're partners with you. So the most important thing that you can do for yourself and your business is to do due diligence, very significant due diligence on every single person who you're working with to raise money from. That means talking to all the other people that they've invested in and coming to a kind of a culture connect with them. Otherwise, don't do it, because it won't be a good fit. All money is green, but all money is not really a great way to get your business to the next level. So I really advise serious due diligence, and I've seen people who said, oh, I've got money. Well, who's it from? And then you just sit there and you know who that person is, and you know they shouldn't be doing business with them. And so that's really important. It's a transaction for the investor. I don't care how much they talk about how supportive they are of the entrepreneur. They need to get a return on investment. So it is a transaction. And if you think about it that way, then you can take it to the next stage to say, how do we get along with this person? Can we actually do business together? And it's a marriage. That's how I always frame it. And so they can talk about, the nuts and bolts of doing the transaction, but, if I speak for the entrepreneur, it really is, who do you want to get in bed with? And do your due diligence.
Well, that's a good advice this morning. I want to just stress the human dimension that I think Terry alluded to. I've observed over the years that the clients that were the most successful had great people skills. Basically, it's a sales process. Business plans, all these other things are critical. But what you're trying to do is to have it at the bottom line is that the investor has confidence in you and your team. Right?
Yeah, I would say make sure you have your team put together, your advisory team together, and all your ducks in a row before you go out there making the elevator pitch. Because I'll have entrepreneurs come into my office, and they're asking very, very basic questions as far as their structure, what should I do? And I think, they tend to be real go-getters, do-it-yourself type. That's sort of just the personality types that they are, which is wonderful. But I think there's an inclination to just sort of go out and do it yourself. And I think that when they do that, whether it's like setting, I'm going to go online and set up a corporation, or I'm going to do whatever, and it may reflect some naivete. I get calls all the time from brokers, from investors, from lenders, saying, "Hey Frank, do you know these guys? Because they came into my office and whatever. They may have mentioned my name. They may not. Do you know these guys?" And I'm not saying this to pat myself on the head, but if I say, "Oh yes, they're for real," that carries a certain amount of weight with them. And I'm not the only one. I'm sure if Irwin said it, if others here said it. So, you having that team around you that can vouch for you, it puts the people at risk, at ease, saying, "Oh, okay, so his stuff has been reviewed by the right people. He's doing it right. He's got the right people on. He clearly knows what he's doing." Because at the end of the day, my experience has been, and maybe Terry or otherwise can speak to this, is that these industry, the investment, the private equity, venture capital, angel investing, it's like a little sewing circle. I mean, these guys, they frequently all know each other, they hang out with each other, and they do the same thing. They call each other and they say, "Hey, Terry, I just had these guys that come in my office, give me a pitch. Do you know these guys? Have you ever heard of these guys?" And and if Terry responds by saying, "Oh yeah, they were in my office last week. They're just we're not even looking at them." Well, boom, you're dead. So when you meet that first one, do it right. Have all your ducks in a row, because I guarantee you they're going to be talking to each other. And if you blow the first 2 or 3, the fifth or sixth one already knows who you are, and they're not even going to take your call anymore. So make sure all that is pulled together. That's my biggest bit of advice.
Well, we're going to adjourn in a moment, but I'd like to thank everybody for their questions. I apologize I couldn't get to all of them in our time frame as we've gone a bit over, but hopefully this session has been informative for you. I imagine we've only scratched the surface, but again, thanks for your questions. It contributed to, I think, a very useful conversation. Foremost, thanks to our panelists for giving us their time and expertise. I'd like to give them a big round. So thank you very much. I thank you in advance for your time this afternoon, as they'll be staying and giving us more of their time to do the one-on-one sessions, the mentoring sessions with you. Before we do go on that front, I also would like to thank again Commissioner Pai and Chairwoman Clyburn for coming to join us. That's a special treat for us when they're able to take time out of their busy schedules to lend their remarks. Before we go, again, just a couple members of my staff that you should check in with. Calvin Osborne, who's in the back, will be available to direct you if you need assistance. I believe it's Karen Beverly. Is she here? Karen is right there, who runs the show. So if for those of you who haven't gotten your schedules, please do check in with Karen. If for any reason you're not able to keep your meetings in the afternoon, by all means, let Karen know as soon as possible. We want to make sure we finalize the schedule. If there are any openings, we can let people know as quickly as possible. If you're also looking for a meeting and you weren't able to register, please do check in with Karen. So with that, I am going to adjourn us. Thanks again, everyone, and thank you. Thank you. And for all of you who have meetings, please do be back here by 10 minutes to 1 or thereabout. Just